When I opened that crumpled piece of paper, I never imagined that those 5 words scribbled by my daughter would change everything: fake, sick, and leave. I looked at her, confused, and she just shook her head frantically, begging me to believe her. It was only later that I discovered why. But before I continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you are watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. The morning had started like any other in our home in the suburbs of Westchester, New York. It had been a little over 2 years since I married Richard, a successful entrepreneur I met after my divorce. Our life seemed perfect in everyone's eyes: a comfortable colonial-style house, money in the bank, and my daughter Hannah finally having the stability she so desperately needed. Hannah was always an observant child. Too quiet for her 14 years, she seemed to absorb everything around her like a sponge. At first, her relationship with Richard was difficult, as is expected of any teenager dealing with a stepfather, but over time they seemed to have found a balance. Or at least, that's what I thought. That Saturday morning, Richard had invited his business partners to a brunch at our house. It was an important event. They were going to discuss the company's expansion, and Richard was particularly anxious to impress them. I spent the whole week preparing everything, from the menu to the smallest details of the decor. I was in the kitchen finishing the salad when Hannah appeared. Her face was pale, and there was something in her eyes I couldn't identify immediately. Tension? Fear? "Mom," she murmured, approaching as if she didn't want to draw attention. "I need to show you something in my room." Richard entered the kitchen at that moment, adjusting his expensive tie. He always dressed impeccably, even for informal events at home. "What are you two whispering about?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing important," I replied automatically. "Hannah is just asking for help with something for school." "Fine, be quick," he said, checking his Rolex. "The guests arrive in 30 minutes, and I need you here to welcome them with me." I nodded, following my daughter down the hallway. As soon as we entered her room, she closed the door quickly, almost with a movement too abrupt. "What's wrong, honey? You're scaring me." Hannah didn't answer. Instead, she took a small piece of paper from her desk and shoved it into my hands, looking nervously toward the door. I unfolded the paper and read the words written in haste. "Fake sick and leave now." "Hannah, what kind of joke is this?" I asked, confused and a little annoyed. We didn't have time for games, not with guests about to arrive. "It's not a joke." Her voice was just a whisper. "Please, Mom, trust me. You need to get out of this house now. Make up anything. Say you feel sick, but leave." The desperation in her eyes paralyzed me. In all my years as a mother, I had never seen my daughter so serious, so terrified. "Hannah, you're alarming me. What is going on?" She looked toward the door again, as if fearing someone was listening. "I can't explain right now. I promise I'll tell you everything later. But right now you have to trust me, please." Before I could insist, we heard footsteps in the hallway. The doorknob turned, and Richard appeared, his demeanor now visibly irritated. "What is taking so long?" The first guests just pulled into the driveway. I looked at my daughter, whose eyes were pleading silently. Then, on an impulse I couldn't explain, I decided to trust her. "I'm sorry, Richard," I said, bringing my hand to my forehead. "I'm feeling a little dizzy all of a sudden. I think it might be a migraine." Richard frowned. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Just now, Sarah? You were perfectly fine 5 minutes ago." "I know. It came on suddenly," I explained, trying to look genuinely unwell. "You guys start without me. I'm going to take a pill and lie down for a bit." For a tense moment, I thought he was going to argue. But then the doorbell rang, and he seemed to decide that dealing with the guests was more important. "All right, but try to join us as soon as possible," he said, leaving the room. As soon as we were alone again, Hannah grabbed my hands. "You're not going to lie down. We are leaving here right now. Say you need to go to CVS to buy stronger medication. I'm going with you." "Hannah, this is absurd. I can't just abandon our guests." "Mom," her voice trembled, "I'm begging you. This isn't a game. It's about your life." There was something so raw, so genuine in her fear, that I felt a shiver run down my spine. What could have frightened my daughter so much? What did she know that I didn't? Quickly, I grabbed my purse and car keys. We found Richard in the living room, chatting animatedly with 2 men in suits. "Richard, excuse me," I interrupted. "My headache is getting worse. I'm going to the pharmacy to get something stronger. Hannah is coming with me to keep me company." His smile froze for an instant before he turned to the guests with an expression of resignation. "My wife isn't feeling well," he explained. "Come back soon," he added, turning to me, his tone casual, but his eyes conveying something I couldn't decipher. When we got into the car, Hannah was shaking. "Drive, Mom," she said, looking back at the house as if expecting something terrible to happen at any moment. "Get far away from here. I'll explain everything on the way." I started the car, 1,000 questions swirling in my mind. What could be so serious to make my daughter act like this? It was when she started talking that my entire world fell apart. "Richard is trying to kill you, Mom," she said, the words coming out like a suppressed sob. "I heard him last night on the phone talking about putting poison in your tea." I slammed on the brakes, almost hitting the back of a delivery truck stopped at a traffic light. My whole body froze, and for a moment I couldn't breathe, let alone speak. Hannah's words seemed absurd, like something out of a cheap thriller movie. "What, Hannah? That's not funny at all," I managed to say finally, my voice weaker than I would have liked. "Do you think I would joke about something like that?" Her eyes were watery, her face twisted in an expression mixing fear and anger. A driver behind us honked, and I realized the light had turned green. Automatically, I stepped on the gas, driving aimlessly, just to get away from the house. "Tell me exactly what you heard," I asked, trying to stay calm, yet feeling my heart beating against my ribs like a caged animal. Hannah took a deep breath before starting. "Last night I went down for water. It was late, maybe 2 a.m. The door to Richard's home office was ajar, and the light was on. He was talking on the phone, whispering." She paused, as if gathering courage. "At first I thought it was business stuff, you know, but then he said your name. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. He said, 'Everything is planned for tomorrow. Sarah will drink the tea like she always does during these events. No one will suspect anything. It will look like a heart attack,' you assured me. And then he laughed. Mom." He laughed like he was talking about the weather. I felt my stomach churn. That couldn't be true. Richard, the man with whom I shared my bed, my life, planning to kill me. It was too absurd. "Maybe you misunderstood," I suggested, desperately looking for any alternative explanation. Maybe it was about another Sarah, or maybe it was some kind of metaphor for something business-related. Hannah shook her head vehemently. "No, Mom. He was talking about you. About today's meeting. He said that with you out of the way, he would have full access to the insurance money and the house." She hesitated before adding, "And he mentioned my name too. He said that afterward he would deal with me one way or another." A chill ran down my spine. Richard had always been so affectionate, so attentive. How could I have been so wrong? How did I not notice anything? "Why would he do that?" I murmured, more to myself than to her. "The life insurance, Mom. The one you guys took out 6 months ago, remember? $2 million. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The insurance. Of course, Richard had insisted so much on that policy, saying it was to protect me, to secure my future in case anything happened to him. But now, under this sinister new light, I realized it had been the opposite from the beginning. "There's more," Hannah continued, her voice almost a whisper now. After he hung up, he started looking through some papers. I waited for him to leave and went into the office. There were documents about his debts, Mom. A lot of debts. "It looks like the company is almost bankrupt." I pulled the car over onto the shoulder, unable to keep driving with my mind in such a whirlwind. Richard was broke. How did I not know? He always talked about how business was booming, about how we were financially secure. "I also found this," Hannah said, taking a folded paper from her pocket. "It's a statement from an account at another bank. In his name, he's been transferring money there for months, small amounts so as not to raise suspicion." I took the paper with trembling hands. It was true. An account I was completely unaware of, accumulating what seemed to be our money, my money, actually, from the sale of the apartment I had inherited from my parents. The reality began to crystallize, cruel and undeniable. Richard wasn't just broke, he was systematically stealing from me for months, probably since the beginning of our marriage. And now, with debts piling up and less money to siphon off, he had decided I was worth more dead than alive. My God, I whispered, feeling nauseous. How was I so blind? Hannah put her hand over mine, a gesture of comfort that seemed absurdly mature coming from a 14-year-old. It's not your fault, Mom. He fooled everyone. Even me, for a while. Suddenly, a terrible idea came to my mind. Hannah, did you take those documents from his office? What if he realizes they're missing? What if he suspects, Fear returned to her eyes. I took pictures with my phone and put everything back. I don't think he'll notice. But even as she said it, she didn't seem totally convinced, and neither was I. Richard was meticulous, observant. If something was out of place, he would notice. We need to call the police, I decided, grabbing my phone. And say what? Hannah questioned. That I heard him talking about killing you on the phone? That we found documents showing he's moving money? We don't have real proof, Mom. She was right, of course. It was our word against his. A respected businessman against a hysterical ex-wife and a troubled teenager. I could already imagine how the story would be twisted. As we contemplated our options, my phone vibrated. A text from Richard. Where are you guys? The guests are asking for you. Another chill ran down my spine. His message seemed so normal, so banal, as if he hadn't planned to murder me hours ago. What are we going to do now? Hannah asked, her voice trembling. It was a question for which I had no answer. We couldn't go back home, that was clear, but we couldn't simply disappear without a plan either. Richard had resources, contacts. If we ran without thinking, he would eventually find us. First, we need proof, I decided finally. Concrete proof that we can take to the police. Like what? Like the poison he intended to use today. The plan that began to form in my mind was risky, perhaps even reckless. But as the initial terror gave way to a cold, calculating rage, I knew we needed to act, and fast. We're going back, I announced, turning the key in the ignition. What? Hannah's eyes widened in panic. Mom, have you lost your mind? He's going to kill you. Not if I catch him first, I replied, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. Think with me, Hannah. If we run now without proof, what happens? Richard will claim I had a breakdown, that I took you on an irrational impulse. In time, he'll find us, and we'll be even more vulnerable. I made a sharp U-turn, heading back toward our house. We need concrete evidence. The poison he plans to use today is our best shot. If we can find it, we'll have something tangible to show the police. Hannah stared at me, her face a mixture of fear and admiration. But how are we going to do it without him noticing? We'll keep up the charade. I'll say I stopped by the pharmacy, took a painkiller, and am feeling a little better. You'll go straight to your room, pretending to be unwell too. While I distract Richard and the guests, you search the office, in the places where you saw him looking recently. Hannah nodded slowly, her gaze determined despite the evident fear. And if I find something? Or worse, what if he realizes what we're doing? I swallowed hard, trying not to let my own dread show. Send a text with the word, now. If I get it, I'll make up an excuse and we'll leave immediately. If you find something, take photos. But don't take anything. We can't risk him realizing something is missing. As we approached the house, I felt my heart beating harder and harder. I was about to walk into the wolf's den, knowing now that the man I called my husband planned to kill me. The thought was so surreal, it almost seemed like a nightmare, one I desperately wanted to wake up from. When I parked in the driveway, I noticed there were more cars than when we left. All the guests had arrived. Remember the plan, I told Hannah as we walked toward the door. Act naturally. If at any moment you feel you are in danger, get out of the house immediately. Go to Mrs. Higgins' house next door. Understood? My daughter nodded, squeezing my hand briefly before we entered. The hum of conversations and laughter greeted us as soon as we opened the door. In the living room, about 10 people were chatting animatedly, champagne glasses in hand. Richard was in the center, telling some story that was making everyone laugh. When he saw us, his smile faltered for an instant before he composed himself. "Ah, you're back!" he exclaimed, approaching and putting an arm around my waist. His touch, once comforting, now caused me revulsion. "Feeling better, darling?" "A little," I replied, forcing a smile. "The medicine is starting to kick in." "Good to hear that." He turned to Hannah. "And you, kiddo? You look a little pale." "I have a headache too," Hannah murmured, playing her part perfectly. "I think I'm going to lie down for a while." Of course, Richard said, his concern so convincing that if I didn't know the truth, I would have believed it completely. Rest up. If you need anything, we're down here. Hannah went up the stairs, and I joined the guests, accepting a glass of water Richard offered me. I declined the champagne, claiming it wouldn't mix well with the medication. No tea today? He asked casually, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I don't think so, I replied, keeping my tone light. I'm trying to avoid caffeine when I have a migraine. Something darkened in his eyes for a brief moment, but soon disappeared, replaced by his usual charm. Wise of you. Come, I want to introduce you to someone. As Richard guided me among the guests, I kept a smile fixed on my face, although inside I was on high alert. Every time he touched my arm or back, I had to fight the urge to pull away. Every smile he threw my way now seemed loaded with sinister ulterior motives. Sarah is a university professor, he was saying to one of his partners, his pride apparently genuine, comparative literature, a brilliant mind. It was surreal to hear those compliments, knowing that behind the scenes he was planning my end. How many times had he praised me like this while secretly plotting against me? How many times had his "I love you" been a mask for "I want your money"? I checked my phone covertly. No message from Hannah yet. That meant she was still searching or hadn't found anything suspicious. About 20 minutes later, while Richard and I were chatting with a couple about the country's economic situation, my phone vibrated. A single word on the screen. Now. My blood froze. We needed to leave immediately. Excuse me, I said to the group, forcing a smile. I need to check on how Hannah is feeling. Before Richard could protest, I walked away quickly, going up the stairs almost running. I found Hannah in her room, her face pale as paper. He's coming, she whispered, grabbing my arm. I noticed he was coming up the stairs and ran in here. Did you find anything? I asked quickly, already pulling her toward the door. Yes, in the office. A small bottle with no label hidden in the desk drawer. I took pictures. We didn't have time for more. We heard footsteps in the hallway and then Richard's voice. Sarah? Hannah? Are you in there? I exchanged a quick look with my daughter. We couldn't go out through the hallway now. He would see us. The bedroom window faced the back of the house, but we were on the second floor. A dangerous drop. Stay where you are, I whispered. Let's pretend we were talking. The door opened, and Richard entered, his gaze immediately fixing on Hannah's frightened face. Everything okay in here? He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes alert, suspicious. Yes, I replied, trying to sound normal. Hannah still has a headache. I came to see if she needed anything. Richard studied us for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. I see. And you, darling? Did the pain get a little better? I lied, I said. I think I can go back to the party now. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Excellent. By the way, I prepared that special tea you like. It's waiting for you in the kitchen. My stomach twisted. The tea. The trap he had mentioned on the phone. Thanks, but I think I'll pass for today. The medicine. I insist, he interrupted, his tone still friendly but with a newfound firmness. It's a new blend I ordered especially for you. It helps with headaches. I realized then how dangerous our situation was. If I refused too vehemently, it would raise suspicions. If I drank the tea, I would die. Okay, I agreed finally, trying to buy time. I'll just stay a few more minutes with Hannah. Richard hesitated for a moment, as if debating internally, before nodding. Don't take too long. The guests are asking for you. As soon as he left, closing the door behind him, Hannah and I exchanged alarmed looks. The tea, she whispered. He's going to insist you drink it. I know, I replied, feeling the panic rise. We need to get out of here now. Out the window if necessary. But as we contemplated our escape, I heard something that made me freeze. The sound of a key turning in the lock, locking us in from the outside. Richard wasn't just watching us, he had trapped us. He locked us in, Hannah exclaimed, running to the door and trying to open it uselessly. Panic threatened to paralyze me, but I forced myself to think rationally. If Richard had locked us in, it meant he suspected something. Maybe he had realized his office had been invaded, or maybe the fear in our eyes had betrayed us. The window, I decided, moving quickly toward it. It's our only way out now. I opened the curtain and looked down. It was a drop of about 15 feet to the grass in the backyard. Not fatal, certainly, but dangerous enough to cause serious injuries if we weren't careful. "It's too high, Mom," Hannah said, her face twisted with fear. "I know, honey, but we have no choice." I looked around the room, searching for something that could help us. My eyes landed on the duvet on the bed. "We can use this as a makeshift rope." Quickly, I ripped the duvet off and began tying it to the heavy leg of the desk. It wouldn't be long enough to get us to the ground, but it would significantly reduce the height of the drop. "Mom," Hannah called softly, pointing toward the door. "He's coming back." Straining my ears, I realized she was right. Footsteps were approaching in the hallway. Richard was returning, and something told me it wasn't to check on our well-being. "Quick," I whispered, finishing the knot on the desk and throwing the duvet out the window. "You go first. Climb down as far as you can on the duvet and then let go. Try to land on your knees and roll to distribute the impact." Hannah hesitated for only a second before positioning herself in the window, legs out. The footsteps were closer. Now we heard the key being inserted into the lock. "Go," I ordered, helping her hold the duvet firmly. With surprising agility, Hannah began to descend, using the duvet as a makeshift rope. I watched anxiously as she reached the end of the fabric, still about 6 feet from the ground. "Let go now," I instructed, seeing the doorknob start to turn. Hannah let go of the duvet and fell onto the grass, rolling as I had instructed. For a terrible moment, I thought she was hurt, but soon I saw her get up, making a gesture to indicate she was okay. There was no more time. Richard was entering the room. Without thinking twice, I grabbed the duvet and threw myself out the window, sliding down the fabric so quickly I burned my hands. When I reached the end, I heard a furious scream coming from the room. "Sarah." Richard's voice, unrecognizable with rage, made me let go of the duvet without hesitation. I fell awkwardly onto the grass, feeling a sharp pain in my left ankle, but the adrenaline was so high I barely registered the pain, getting up immediately. "Run!" I screamed to Hannah, who was standing a few yards away, looking up in horror. Following her gaze, I saw Richard leaning out the window, his face twisted into a mask of fury. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to jump after us, but instead, he disappeared from our field of view. "He's going to come down the stairs," I alerted, grabbing Hannah's hand. "We need to be fast." We ran through the backyard, me limping slightly due to the pain in my ankle, toward the low wall that separated our property from the side street. Hannah hopped over first, and I followed with difficulty, feeling a stab of pain when I landed on the other side. "Where do we go?" Hannah asked, panting. I looked quickly around, evaluating our options. Our house was in a gated community, but lightly patrolled. The main guardhouse was about a quarter-mile away, but by now Richard would have alerted the guards, probably inventing some story about his mentally unstable wife running away with their teenage daughter. "That way," I decided, pointing toward a cluster of trees that led to a wooded area of the community. "We can cut through the woods and go out the service entrance." As we ran, I heard the sound of doors slamming and loud voices. Richard had alerted the guests, transforming our escape into a public spectacle. I imagined him feigning concern, saying something like, "My wife isn't well, she has episodes like this sometimes. Please help me find her." The thought gave me the strength to ignore the pain and run faster. I wouldn't let him turn me into the villain of this story. We reached the woods, a small nature preserve residence used for walks. At this time of day, it was deserted, which was a blessing. We followed a narrow trail, trying to stay quiet as we advanced. The photos, I remembered, looking at Hannah. "Do you still have the photos of the bottle?" She nodded, taking her phone out of her pocket to show me. Hannah's phone showed images of a small amber bottle with no label, hidden among documents in Richard's desk drawer. It was so common, so anonymous, it would go unnoticed by anyone. But I knew that therein lay the weapon my husband planned to use against me. "There's more," Hannah said, swiping her finger across the screen to show other photos. "I found this too." The next image showed a sheet of paper with Richard's unmistakable handwriting. A list with times and notes. 10:30, guests arrive. 11:45. Serve tea effects in 15-20 minutes. 12:10, appear worried. Call 911 too late. My stomach turned. It was a detailed schedule of my death, planned like someone organizing a business meeting. Cold, methodical, in his own hand. "My God," I whispered. He really was going to kill me today. We heard distant voices approaching through the woods. The search party had reached us. "Come on," I insisted, pulling Hannah by the hand. "The service gate must be close." We kept running, now off the trail, through trees and bushes, trying to stay away from the voices. My ankle throbbed with every step, but fear was a powerful anesthetic. Finally, we spotted the small metal gate that maintenance staff used to enter and exit the community. "It's locked," I noted, trying to push it without success. Hannah looked around desperately until her eyes lit up with an idea. "Mom, your resident ID card works on the scanner." Quickly, I grabbed my purse and took out the card we used for amenities. I swiped it over the reader, praying it would work. The green light turned on, and the gate unlocked with a click. We stepped out onto a quiet, narrow street at the back of the complex, far from the main entrance. It was a regular residential area with simple houses and a few shops. No one on the streets at this hour on a Saturday. "Where are we going now?" Hannah asked, still holding my hand tightly. I thought quickly. We couldn't go to friends' or family's houses. Those would be the first places Richard would look for us. We needed somewhere anonymous, temporary. "We're going to take a taxi to the Galleria Mall," I decided. "From there, we can think better and go to the police station." We walked hurriedly to a larger avenue, where we managed to flag down a cab. The driver looked at us with curiosity, two panting women, with wrinkled clothes and frightened expressions, but asked no questions when I asked him to take us to the nearest mall. During the ride, Hannah rested her head on my shoulder, trembling slightly. "Are you okay, honey?" I asked softly, stroking her hair. "I'm scared," she confessed. "What if he finds us?" "He won't find us," I assured her with more confidence than I actually felt. "We're going to the police. With the proof you got, they'll protect us." At the mall, I looked for a discreet place where we could sit. A coffee shop on the second floor seemed ideal, busy enough not to draw attention, but not too crowded. We ordered 2 hot chocolates and sat in a secluded corner. "We need to call the police now," I said, picking up my phone. That was when I noticed the dozens of missed calls and texts from Richard. With shaking hands, I opened the last message. "Sarah, please come home. I'm so worried about you and Hannah. If this is about our argument yesterday, we can talk. Don't do anything impulsive. I love you." The falseness of those words caused a new wave of nausea. He was building his narrative, creating proof that I was unstable, maybe even inventing an argument that never happened. "What is he doing?" Hannah asked, watching my expression. "Creating an alibi," I replied, showing her the message. "He's going to claim I had some kind of breakdown, that I imagined everything." Another message arrived. "I called the police. They are looking for you. They are worried about both of you. Please, Sarah, think of Hannah." My blood froze. He had involved the police, but not as a victim, as the worried husband of an emotionally unstable woman. "This complicates everything," I murmured. "If the police are looking for us based on his story..." Hannah looked at me with scared eyes. "What are we going to do?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. We needed help, someone who would believe us and could give us support against Richard's accusations. "I'm going to call Rachel Foster," I decided finally. Rachel Foster was my friend from college, and now a criminal defense attorney. We didn't talk often, but we kept in touch. If there was anyone who could guide us right now, it was her. I dialed her number, praying she would answer on a Saturday. "Rachel, it's Sarah," I said as soon as she answered. "I have a serious problem. I need your help." In the next 20 minutes, I explained everything to her. Hannah's note, the conversation my daughter overheard, the photos of the bottle and the schedule, our desperate escape. Rachel listened without interrupting, asking only pointed questions to clarify details. "Where are you now?" she asked finally. "At the Galleria Mall," I replied. "In the coffee shop on the second floor." "Stay there," she ordered. "I'm coming to get you. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't talk to anyone, especially police officers, until I arrive. Understood?" "Yes," I accepted, feeling momentary relief. "Thanks, Rachel." While we waited, Hannah and I remained silent, nervously watching the people around us. Every man who entered the coffee shop made me flinch, fearing to see Richard's face. "How did you know?" I finally asked Hannah, holding her hands across the table. "How did you realize something was wrong even before hearing that conversation?" Hannah lowered her gaze, hesitant. "I was already suspicious of him for a while, Mom," she confessed. Small things. The way he looked at you when he thought no one was watching, cold, calculating, and how he got nervous when you mentioned the money from the apartment sale. I swallowed hard, realizing how many signs I had ignored because I was so involved, so blindly in love. Once, Hannah continued, I heard him talking on the phone about how the plan was taking longer than expected. At the time, I thought it was about work, but after I heard the conversation last night, everything started to make sense. Why didn't you tell me before, honey? Because I wasn't sure. And you looked happy with him, Mom. After everything we went through with Dad, I didn't want to ruin your happiness because of suspicions that could just be in my head. Until last night, when I was sure, tears streamed down my face as the truth hit me with full force. My teenage daughter had realized the danger long before I did. She had protected me when I should have been protecting her. I'm sorry, I whispered, squeezing her hands. I'm sorry for not seeing it. It's not your fault, Hannah said with a maturity that surprised me. He fooled everyone. He was very good at that. At that moment, my phone vibrated with a new message. It was Richard again. The police found blood in Hannah's room. Sarah, what did you do? Please tell me you two are okay. I showed the message to Hannah, who went pale. Blood? There was no blood in my room. He's planting evidence, I concluded, feeling a new dread, trying to make it look like I hurt you. Or worse. That took everything to a new level of danger. Richard wasn't just trying to make me look unstable. He was framing me for a crime I didn't commit. Let's get out of here, Hannah said, starting to get up. What if the police come looking for us here? No, I replied firmly. Rachel said to wait. If we leave now, it will only look like we're fleeing, which would give more credibility to Richard's lies. That was when I saw 2 uniformed police officers on the other side of the coffee shop, entering and looking around as if searching for someone. Mom, Hannah whispered, also noticing the cops. Stay calm, I instructed, although my own heart was racing. We didn't do anything wrong. We have proof. We're going to talk to them, but very carefully. The officers spotted us and began to approach our table. I saw recognition in their eyes. They probably had a description of us, maybe even photos. Mrs. Sarah Mendoza? Asked one of them, stopping at our table. Yes, that's me, I replied, keeping my voice as calm as possible. Your husband is very worried about you and your daughter, he said, his tone professional but cautious. He reported that you left the house in an altered state, possibly putting the minor at risk. Before I could answer, Hannah intervened. That's a lie. My stepfather is trying to kill us. I have proof. The officers exchanged skeptical looks after Hannah's emphatic statement. The older one, a man of about 50, with graying hair at the temples, frowned. That is a very serious accusation, young lady, he said, his tone now graver. We have proof, I insisted, keeping my voice low but firm. My daughter found a bottle of poison in my husband's office, along with a schedule detailing how and when he planned to kill me today. The younger officer, who until then had remained silent, stepped forward. Ma'am, your husband informed us that you may be experiencing psychological issues, he said, choosing his words carefully. He said you've had similar episodes before. Rage bubbled inside me. Richard had prepared the ground perfectly. That is absurd. I have never had any episodes, I replied, fighting to maintain composure. My husband is lying to you because we discovered his plans. Hannah took out her phone. Look, she said, showing the photos she had taken. This is the bottle I found hidden in his office, and this paper has the timeline of when he was going to poison her. The officers examined the photos, their expressions hard to read. This looks like a common bottle, observed the older one. As for the paper, it could be any notes. I don't see anything explicitly indicating a murder plan. I felt despair growing. They weren't taking us seriously. You don't understand, I insisted. He has kept us isolated for months. He controls our finances, our movements. We recently discovered he is bankrupt and funneling my money into secret accounts. Mom, Hannah interrupted, pointing toward the entrance of the coffee shop. It's Attorney Foster. I looked in the direction indicated and saw my friend walking quickly toward us. Even after so many years, I would recognize her anywhere. Tall, confident posture, dressed impeccably in a navy blue blazer despite it being Saturday. Her determined look brought me immense relief. Sarah, she said, stopping next to us and immediately assessing the situation. "I see the police have already arrived." "Who are you, ma'am?" asked the older officer. "Rachel Foster," she replied, extending a business card. "Criminal defense attorney. I am representing Mrs. Sarah Mendoza and her daughter Hannah." The officers seemed to recalibrate their approach immediately. "Counselor, we received a report from Mr. Richard Mendoza claiming his wife is mentally unstable and may pose a danger to the minor," explained the officer. "I understand," Rachel said with a slight smile. "And you considered, of course, that Mr. Mendoza might be making false accusations to cover up his own crimes, correct?" The officer's silence was telling. "Let's clarify a few points," Rachel continued, sitting next to me. "My clients have photographic evidence of potentially lethal substances and written documentation suggesting a plan to poison Mrs. Mendoza. Furthermore, the minor, Miss Hannah, witnessed a phone conversation in which Mr. Mendoza explicitly discussed his plans. The officers seemed to consider this new information, but were still hesitant. "Do you have a warrant to take my clients?" Rachel asked directly. "No, counselor," admitted the older officer. "We are just investigating a potential missing person based on Mr. Mendoza's account." "Good." "As you can see, no one is missing," Rachel replied dryly. "My clients are well and safe, away from a credible threat to their lives." "Mr. Mendoza mentioned blood found in the minor's room," commented the younger officer, looking at Hannah. "He said he was worried the mother might have done something." Hannah let out a nervous laugh. "That's ridiculous. There was no blood in my room. He is planting evidence." "I would like to verify if the minor is okay," insisted the officer. "She is clearly fine," replied Rachel, "and she is under my legal protection. At this moment, I suggest you return to the precinct and register a countersuit I will be filing right now. Attempted homicide, tampering with evidence, and filing a false police report against Mr. Richard Mendoza." The officers looked uncomfortable but didn't insist. "We will need them to appear at the station to give a statement," said the older officer finally. "Of course," Rachel accepted. "We will be there in an hour. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to talk in private." Reluctantly, the officers walked away, not without casting worried glances in our direction. As soon as we were alone, Rachel held my hands across the table. "Sarah, the situation is worse than I imagined," she said in a low voice. "Richard acted fast. He is building a case against you, trying to paint you as an unstable woman who could hurt her own daughter." "What are we going to do?" I asked, feeling fear renew itself. "First, we need more concrete proof," Rachel replied. "The photos are a start, but we need the actual bottle and an analysis proving it contains poison. And we need to find more evidence of Richard's financial maneuvering." "But how?" questioned Hannah. "We can't go back home." "You don't need to," Rachel assured. "I'm going to request a search warrant immediately. I have contacts who can expedite this, especially considering there is a minor potentially in danger." She paused, looking at me seriously. "Sarah, you have to be strong now. Richard is going to play dirty. He's going to bring up anything that can discredit you. Small arguments, moments of stress, anything that can be twisted to make you seem unstable." I swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of the situation. "How did he manage to fool me so completely?" I murmured, more to myself than to Rachel. "People like Richard are masters of manipulation," she replied. "Functional sociopaths who can keep up a perfect facade for years. Don't blame yourself for not noticing." At that moment, my phone vibrated again. Another message from Richard. "Sarah, the police found you. I'm coming to the mall now. I just want to help. Please don't do anything impulsive before I get there." I showed the message to Rachel, who immediately went on alert. "He's coming here," she said, standing up. "We need to leave now." "Where to?" I asked, helping Hannah gather her things. "To the precinct," Rachel replied. "It's the safest place right now. Richard won't try anything there, and we can formally register our complaint before he arrives." We left the coffee shop quickly, taking the long way to the parking garage to avoid the main entrance. Rachel guided us to her car, a discreet black sedan, and soon we were on our way to the police station. During the ride, Hannah held my hand firmly, her face pale but determined. I remembered how she had saved my life today with that simple note. How many other wives didn't have the same luck? How many didn't realize the danger until it was too late? The precinct was relatively quiet for a Saturday. Rachel led us directly to the office of Detective Miller, with whom she apparently had a good professional relationship. "Detective Miller," she greeted the middle-aged man sitting behind the desk. "We have a serious situation here." The detective looked at us with curiosity, inviting us to sit. "My clients are being threatened by Mrs. Mendoza's husband," Rachel explained succinctly. "We have evidence that he planned to poison her today during an event at their home." The detective raised his eyebrows, surprised by the gravity of the accusation. "That is a serious charge, Miss Foster. And we have serious evidence," she replied, signaling for Hannah to show the photos. The detective examined the images with more attention than the officers at the coffee shop had done. While he analyzed them, Rachel continued, "We also believe Mr. Mendoza is embezzling money from Mrs. Sarah and may be involved in financial fraud. He has attempted to discredit my client, claiming mental instability that was never diagnosed or treated." "I understand," replied the detective, handing the phone back to Hannah. "We need more than photos, Miss Foster. We need the bottle, toxicology reports, concrete evidence." "That is exactly why I am requesting a search warrant for the residence," said Rachel, handing over some documents she had prepared on the way. "There is a minor at risk, and we have reason to believe Mr. Mendoza is planting false evidence at this very moment." The detective began reading the documents when a murmur formed at the entrance of the precinct. Through the glass of the office, I saw Richard entering, accompanied by the same officers who had approached us at the mall. His face was the perfect mask of concern and relief upon seeing us. "Sarah! Hannah!" he exclaimed, trying to enter the room, being stopped by an officer at the door. "Thank God you're okay." The detective looked from Richard to us, clearly trying to assess the situation. "Is this the man in question?" he asked. "Yes," I confirmed, feeling my body tense instinctively. "This is Richard Mendoza, my husband." The detective gestured to let Richard in. He approached, trying to hug Hannah, who recoiled visibly. "What is going on?" he asked, his expression of confusion so convincing that if I didn't know the truth, I would have doubted myself. "Sarah, why did you run off like that?" The guests were so worried. "I was desperate, Mr. Mendoza," Detective Miller intervened. "Mrs. Sarah and her lawyer are filing a complaint against you for attempted homicide." Richard looked genuinely shocked, looking from me to the detective and back to me. "This is absurd," he exclaimed. "Sarah, what are you doing? It's because of that medication. I already explained it was just to help with your anxiety attacks." "What medication?" asked the detective, now more interested. "Sarah has been having problems," Richard explained, his voice softening as if reluctant to share something painful. "Anxiety, paranoia. Sometimes. The doctor prescribed a mild tranquilizer. She thinks I'm trying to drug her, but it's just the medication Dr. Evans prescribed." I felt a chill down my back. His narrative was so plausible, so carefully constructed. "That is a lie," I replied, my voice trembling with anger. "I never had anxiety problems. I never visited this Dr. Evans. He is making all this up." Richard sighed heavily, as if dealing with a difficult child. "See," he said to the detective. "She has denied her condition for months, even refuses to take the medication regularly, which only worsens the episodes." "Mr. Mendoza," interrupted Rachel, her voice cutting like a razor. "My client has never been diagnosed with any psychological disorder. Can you present the medical records proving your allegations?" Richard hesitated for a moment, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "I can request them from Dr. Evans on Monday," he replied. "But that isn't what's important now. I'm worried about Sarah and Hannah. I just want to take them home safe." "That will not be possible for the moment," declared the detective, to my relief. "We have serious accusations on both sides that need to be investigated." It was then that Hannah, who had remained silent until then, stood up abruptly. "I heard everything," she said, looking Richard straight in the eye. "I heard you on the phone last night, planning to poison my mom. You said it would look like a heart attack. You said afterward you would deal with me. You are a liar." Richard's expression changed for an instant, a flash of fury quickly masked by concern. "Hannah, sweetheart," he said softly, "you must have misunderstood. I was talking about business on the phone. Maybe you heard part of the conversation and got confused." "I didn't get confused about anything." Hannah shot back, her voice steady despite the tears beginning to form. "You wanted to kill my mom for the insurance money. You are broke. I saw the documents." Richard's face hardened slightly. "Sarah," he said, turning to me, "do you see what you're doing? You're putting ideas in Hannah's head, making her believe these crazy things. This is psychological abuse." Before I could answer, the office door opened again. A police officer entered, holding an envelope. "Detective," he said, "we just received the preliminary results from the forensics at the Mendoza residence. You're going to want to see this." The detective opened the envelope and examined its contents with a grave expression. The tension in the room was palpable. Richard motionless as a statue, Hannah gripping my hand tightly, Rachel watching every reaction intently. "Interesting," murmured the detective finally, looking directly at Richard. "Mr. Mendoza, you mentioned blood in the miner's room, correct?" Richard nodded, his expression of concern perfectly composed. "Yes. When I entered the room after Sarah and Hannah ran away, I noticed spots on the rug. I despaired, imagining the worst. Curious," continued the detective, placing the papers on the desk, "because according to this preliminary analysis, the blood found in the room is less than 2 hours old, and the blood type analysis does not match either Mrs. Sarah or the miner." I saw Richard's mask falter for an instant. I don't understand," he stammered. "How is that?" "The blood," explained the detective slowly, "matches your blood type, Mr. Mendoza, which strongly suggests it was you who placed it there." A heavy silence fell over the room. Richard seemed to be calculating his next move quickly. "That's impossible," he said finally. "There must be some mistake in the tests. I didn't even cut myself today." "Actually," continued the detective, "forensics found a small vial of blood hidden in the back of your sock drawer. It looks like you had collected your own blood previously." Richard's face paled visibly. "Furthermore," the detective proceeded, "we found this." He took a photo out of the envelope, the amber bottle Hannah had photographed, now in an evidence bag. "The content is being analyzed, but field tests indicate the presence of a substance similar to arsenic. Not exactly something one expects to find in an anxiety medication. Is it, Mr. Mendoza?" Richard stood up abruptly, his face twisted in a mix of anger and panic. "This is absurd. A setup. Sarah must have planted this." "When exactly would she have done that?" asked Rachel calmly. "Considering she and Hannah have been here for over 2 hours, and by your own words, they ran away from the house in the morning." Richard looked around like a cornered animal. "You don't understand," he said, his voice now shaking. "Sarah isn't who you think. She is manipulative. She has been stealing from me for months." "Curious that you mentioned theft," interrupted the detective, "because we also found quite interesting bank documents in your office. Regular transfers from the joint account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was like watching a house of cards collapse. Every new revelation shattered the facade carefully constructed by Richard. His face, before the portrait of loving concern, now revealed what had always been hidden beneath the surface: cold rage, calculation, contempt. "There is an explanation for all of this," he insisted, but his voice no longer carried the same conviction. "I'm sure there is," replied the detective, standing up, "and you will have ample opportunity to explain all of this formally. Richard Mendoza, you are under arrest for investigation of attempted homicide, tampering with evidence, filing a false report, and financial fraud." The detective signaled the officers waiting at the door. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside Richard. In an instant, the entire facade of a worried husband disappeared completely. His face contorted into an expression I had never seen before. Pure evil, raw hatred directed at me. "Stupid bitch!" he screamed, lunging in my direction. "You ruined everything!" The officers grabbed him before he could reach me, but not before I finally saw the real Richard, the monster who had hidden behind smiles and false displays of affection for 2 years. "Did you really think I loved you?" he growled, struggling against the officers holding him. "A mediocre professor with a troubled teenager. You weren't worth anything more than your money and the life insurance." Hannah shrank against me, trembling with the violence of that outburst. I hugged her protectively, watching in shock as the officers handcuffed Richard, who continued shouting obscenities. "Get him out of here," ordered the detective. And the officers dragged Richard out of the room, his screams echoing down the hallway. When the door closed, a heavy silence took over the room. The detective turned to us with an expression mixing regret and relief. "Mrs. Mendoza, I believe you and your daughter will need to give formal statements, but first I would like to apologize personally for what just happened." I nodded mechanically, still processing the transformation I had witnessed. That man shouting insults wasn't the Richard I knew or thought I knew. It was as if I had lived with a stranger for 2 years, slept next to a predator every night. "Sarah," Rachel said softly, holding my hand. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I replied honestly. "I think it will take time to understand all of this." The detective offered us water and suggested we rest a bit before making formal statements. I accepted, hugging Hannah, who seemed in a state of shock. "You saved my life today," I whispered to her. "I will never forget that." She just nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. The following hours passed in a blur of statements, forms, and bureaucratic procedures. I told everything in detail. How I met Richard after my divorce. How he won me over with his apparent kindness and security. How he gradually began to control our finances and isolate us from friends and family. Hannah described what she had heard that fatal night, how she had found the documents and the bottle, and how she had made the brave decision to pass me that note. Fake, sick, and leave. 5 simple words that had changed everything, that had saved me from a terrible fate. Forensics continued working at our house throughout the night, discovering more evidence of Richard's extensive financial fraud. He had systematically transferred almost all the money I owned to secret accounts. He had forged my signature on documents. He had even taken out the $1 million life insurance policy without my actual knowledge. I had signed thinking it was homeowner's insurance. The test on the bottle confirmed what we already knew. It contained a mixture of arsenic and other substances that, if ingested, would cause symptoms similar to a heart attack. An apparently natural death that wouldn't raise suspicions. When we finally finished at the precinct, it was past midnight. Richard had been formally booked and would await a bail hearing. Rachel took us to her house, insisting we couldn't go back to ours. Not just because it was still a crime scene, but because the memories would be too painful. "You can stay with me as long as you need," she said, showing us the guest room. "Tomorrow we'll think about what to do next." That night, lying next to Hannah in Rachel's guest bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard's face transforming. I saw the hate in his eyes when his charade finally crumbled. How had I been so blind? How did I not notice the clues right in front of me? "Mom," Hannah whispered in the dark, her voice small and vulnerable. "Do you think he really never loved us? Not even a little bit?" The question broke my heart. Despite everything, Hannah was still a teenager who had lost a father figure. First her own father in the divorce, and now Richard, in this horrible way. "I don't know, honey," I replied honestly. "But what I know is that the problem wasn't us. It was him. Some people are like that, incapable of truly loving, seeing others only as instruments for their own ends." She remained silent for a long moment. "How are we going to move on, Mom?" she asked finally. It was the $1 million question, how to rebuild our life after such a deep betrayal, how to trust anyone again. "One day at a time," I replied, hugging her. "Together. Always together." In the weeks that followed, we discovered the full extent of Richard's web of lies. He wasn't the successful entrepreneur he claimed to be. His company had been bankrupt for years. He had married me specifically seeking my inheritance and the profit from the apartment I sold after my parents' death. Every romantic gesture, every declaration of love, every moment I thought was special, everything had been calculated, part of a cold and methodical plan. The investigation also revealed that I wasn't his first victim. There was another woman before me, a widow named Lauren, who died naturally 6 months after marrying him. At the time, no one suspected anything. She had heart problems before, so a heart attack didn't raise red flags. Richard inherited everything, spent it quickly, and then found his next prey, me. The trial was a media spectacle. The story of a husband planning to poison his wife for money, stopped only by the alertness of a brave teenager, captured the public's attention. Hannah and I had to relive that terrible day many times in depositions, in interviews with prosecutors, in the courtroom itself. But contrary to what I feared, the process, although painful, was also a form of catharsis. Every revelation, every piece of evidence presented helped me understand that I wasn't guilty, that I wasn't stupid for not noticing. Richard was a skilled sociopath, a predator who had perfected his art over years. The sentence, when it finally arrived, was heavy. 30 years for attempted aggravated homicide, plus 15 years for financial fraud, with strong indications of involvement in his ex-wife's death still under investigation. 6 months after that fateful Saturday, Hannah and I moved into a new apartment in a different town. It was smaller than the house we shared with Richard, but it was ours, a space free of toxic memories, a new beginning. That morning, while unpacking some books, I found a small, folded piece of paper between the pages of a novel. I recognized Hannah's handwriting immediately, and the words transported me back to that crucial moment. Fake, sick, and leave. I kept the note carefully in a small wooden box I kept on my nightstand, a permanent reminder not only of the danger we faced but also of the strength we discovered in ourselves to overcome it. A year passed since the day of the note. Life went on, as it always does, even after the most traumatic events. Hannah and I found a new normal, although carrying invisible scars from that terrible experience. One particularly sunny Saturday afternoon, we were in the kitchen of our apartment making lunch together, something that had become a weekly ritual for us. I watched Hannah cutting tomatoes with precision, her face focused on the task. She had grown so much in this year, not just physically, but in maturity and inner strength. "Penny, for your thoughts," she said, noticing my gaze. "I was thinking about how lucky we are," I replied, surprising both of us with the sincerity of those words. Hannah raised an incredulous eyebrow. "Lucky? After everything we went through with that monster?" I nodded, putting the wooden spoon on the counter and turning completely toward her. "Yes, lucky. Not for finding Richard, obviously, but for having survived. For having each other. For you being brave enough to save me that day." A blush rose up Hannah's neck. Even after a year, she still felt uncomfortable when I mentioned her bravery. "Anyone would do the same," she murmured. "No, they wouldn't," I insisted. "Many people would have frozen in fear. They would have doubted what they heard, waited for more proof. You acted decisively and saved my life." Hannah smiled shyly, turning her attention back to the tomatoes. "You know what Dr. Burke said in therapy this week?" she asked, changing the subject slightly. She said trauma survivors often develop a sixth sense for detecting danger. That maybe that's why I always felt something off about Richard, even when you didn't see anything. Dr. Burke was our therapist. We decided to go to therapy together after the trauma, one of the best decisions we made. "She's right," I agreed. "You were always sensitive to people around you, even when you were a kid, and after the difficult divorce with your dad." I let the sentence hang in the air, not wanting to bring up more painful memories. The divorce from my first husband had been turbulent, with him completely abandoning his paternal responsibilities. Hannah was only 9 at the time, and the rejection had left marks. "Yeah, I think I learned to recognize men who aren't trustworthy," she said with a wisdom beyond her years. We continued preparing lunch in a comfortable silence, each lost in her own thoughts. The apartment was full of natural light, the aroma of fresh spices filled the air, and there was a sense of peace I thought for a long time I would never feel again. The doorbell rang, interrupting our moment. "Must be Rachel," I commented, checking the clock. "She's always early." Rachel had become more than our lawyer. She was a close friend, a constant presence in our journey of recovery. We had dinner together at least once a month, a tradition that started as a way to discuss ongoing legal aspects of the case but evolved into genuine friendship. I opened the door, and there she was, holding a bottle of wine and an animated expression. "I have news," she announced, entering and hugging me, before doing the same with Hannah. "Good news, for a change." We sat in the living room, curious about what had made Rachel so excited. "The police finally got the missing evidence on Lauren's death," she explained, referring to the widow who had died mysteriously. "They exhumed the body and found traces of arsenic preserved in the hair and nails." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The confirmation that Richard had, in fact, murdered a woman before trying to do the same to me was disturbing, but it also brought a strange sense of validation. "That means," I began, barely managing to formulate the question. "It means he will be tried for first-degree murder," Rachel confirmed, "which, considering his current conviction and the new evidence, will likely result in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Hannah let out an audible sigh. "So, no prison release?" "Never," Rachel assured firmly. "He will never be able to hurt anyone again." The news should have brought me only relief, but I discovered my feelings were more complex. There was sadness too, not for Richard, but for the lives he had destroyed, including Lauren, who wasn't lucky enough to have a Hannah to save her. "There's one more thing," Rachel continued, her tone changing to something lighter. "The sale of Richard's property finally closed. As part of the restitution agreement, the full amount will be transferred to you. It's not everything he stole, but it's a start." I looked at Hannah, who seemed equally surprised. "How much?" I asked. "Approximately $500,000, Rachel replied. "Enough to ensure Hannah can go to any college she wants and to give you back some financial security you lost." It was a considerable sum, especially after a year of living extremely frugally, using only what was left of my savings and my salary as a professor. "I don't know what to say," I murmured. "Say we're going to celebrate with this wine," suggested Rachel, lifting the bottle she had brought. "And that, finally, we can turn this page and look toward the future." While Rachel opened the wine and Hannah finished preparing lunch, I went to my room and opened the small wooden box where I kept the note that had saved my life. I looked at those 5 words for a long moment, reflecting on how something so small and simple had completely changed the course of our lives. Fake sick and leave. If Hannah hadn't been observant enough to notice the signs, if she hadn't been brave enough to act, I shuddered to think of the alternative. I went back to the living room where Rachel and Hannah were chatting animatedly about college plans that now seemed much more viable. Watching them, my intelligent and brave daughter, my loyal and fierce friend, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost left me breathless. "A toast," I said, raising my glass after Rachel poured the wine. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," they repeated in unison. As we savored our lunch, talking about the future instead of the past, I realized that although the scars remained, they had become marks of survival, not just trauma. Richard had tried to destroy us, but in the end, his betrayal strengthened us in ways he could never imagine. I had learned to trust my instincts again, to recognize warning signs in relationships, and, most importantly, to value the strength inside me. A strength that was always there, but that I only discovered when I needed it most. Hannah had grown from an insecure teenager into a confident young woman who knew her own worth. Therapy helped her process not only the trauma with Richard but also the abandonment by her biological father. She was now talking about studying psychology, inspired by the way therapy had helped us heal. "Mom," Hannah said as we washed the dishes together after lunch, Rachel helping to put away the clean plates, "do you remember that conversation we had at the hospital right after everything happened?" I nodded, remembering the hazy days after Richard's arrest, when we both underwent full medical exams to ensure he hadn't started poisoning us slowly, even before that fateful day. "You asked me how we were going to move on," Hannah continued, "and you said, 1 day at a time. Together." "I remember," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "I think we're doing it, aren't we?" She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her eyes. "Moving on, I mean." "Yes," I agreed, hugging her with hands still wet with soap. "We are definitely doing it." That night, after Rachel left and Hannah fell asleep, I sat on the balcony of our apartment watching the city lights. I thought of all the other women who might be, at this precise moment, living with their own Richards, unaware of the danger under their own roofs. I decided then that our story needed to be told not just as a warning, but as a message of hope, to show that it is possible to survive the worst of betrayals and rebuild, that appearances are deceiving, and that sometimes our salvation comes from where we least expect it, like a simple note scribbled in a hurry by a teenager. The next day, I started writing this account, our story, the story of the note that saved my life. And if you are reading this now, I hope you take with you 2 lessons I learned the hard way. Trust your instincts when something seems wrong, even if you can't explain why. And never, ever underestimate the power of a small act of bravery, like the 5 words my daughter wrote that Saturday morning, words that made all the difference between life and death. Fake, sick, and leave. Sometimes, to find your true strength, you first need to fake having it. And then, one day, you realize you aren't faking anymore. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I'll see you there.